Autumn's here and I've got a lovely pumpkin picture for you to paint along with me step by step. We've got a few techniques to show you today and a wow factor at the ending with the glazing, which gels all the picture together. So stay tuned and let's get on. We've got a great pumpkin still life today. So here's a photo. I'll pop that up larger on the screen and I'll pop up a photo of my drawing larger on the screen for you as well, so you can see both of those, so you can screenshot and print them off. I'm going to go through the colours I've got here. So I'm reusing a palette they use for autumn colours, so it looks a bit messy, but I'll explain what I'm doing. So I have got about a pea-sized blob of paint and I'm adding about half a teaspoon of water. So I use my big wash brush just to squeeze it out. And I'm just going to give these colours a little bit of a mix up. I want them to be consistent. So this first one that I'm mixing is Gamboge yellow. I always mix my yellow first so that I don't taint it. So there's the Gamboge yellow. The next one I've got is transparent orange. Now this is an artist quality colour. The nearest you can get in a student quality colour is cadmium orange, and that will work perfectly well. Or you can mix up an orange if you want to. None of these colours are set in stone. You'll just get a slightly different effect. I have got some sap green. So this is student quality. The colours I'm using today are Winsor & Newton and Cotman colours. This one is quinachrome magenta. If you haven't got quinachrome magenta, you could use a little bit of rose. That would work as well. You see they're all pretty consistent. And then dried up on my palette here, I've got a little bit of cobalt blue. So I'm just going to dab my round number 10 into that just to activate it up, because I need that for a little bit later on. I've got some sepia as well here, neat. So any of those colours could be replaced with something similar. Okay, so onto the full sheet of paper. Plenty of water. So I'm using a Saunders Waterford block. It's a rough paper and it's a 12 by 9 that I'm using. Mainly working quarter imperial. This slightly smaller size works a little bit better for the camera, for you to see it better. So that's wet all over. I'm going to come in now with some colours. So this is the Gamboge yellow. So I'm dabbing in where I've got the yellow on there. I don't mind if it flows further. And what I'm also going to do is the reflection on the table. Get that yellow in there as well. Rinse my brush off, dab it off on the kitchen towel. So I've got enough water. When I dab off on the kitchen towel, it's because I've got enough water already in the paint. I tend to paint in two methods. If I'm using neat colour, then I dab into the water and don't dab off on kitchen towel. This is a transparent orange. Again, I don't mind if it goes further. So when you're doing wet in wet, it can all be a bit panicky because you can see it going over your lines, but I don't want you to worry about it. Can you see how I'm curving round the edge of the pumpkin as well? I'm drawing in those lines with the paintbrush. Pick up a little bit of the quinachrome magenta And I'm going to pop that in where it's a little bit darker. We've got those darker shadows and the reflection as well. So this is my base that I'm going to work into after. I like to call it underpainting. This is a bit of the sap green. I'm just going to pop that on there and there. And just dip into some of this blue. You'll often see me reuse a palette. I don't always start with a clean palette, because if there's colours to be used, I think we should use them. So this is just a little bit of cobalt blue. It's just starting to create a little bit of background colour. The beauty of a cotton paper is that you can do this underpainting, and then when it's dry you can paint over, and it just works really nicely. Gives additional depth in there. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off now. Okay, so that's nicely dry now. It's really important with the process of underpainting that you dry it really well. It needs to feel warm to the touch. If it's not warm to the touch, it's not dry. Otherwise the paint will lift. And we've done these beautiful layers to bold it all up, so you want it to stay. So I'm coming onto this back pumpkin first with a little bit of water. I'm going to start to reapply some of the colour. So I'm going to start with a little bit. So this is much more controlled now. I'm doing sections. But you're still going to see those layers underneath, because that's what transparent colours do. So you've given yourself a little bit of atmosphere into the base. This is round number 10 that I'm painting the colour on with. You could go smaller, depending on the size of your paper. I'm just following the edges. It's that whole thing of if you can see the tip of your brush, you'll get a nice edge. If I was trying to do an edge this way, it's not so easy for you to see. For the purposes of the video, I try not to move my my pad too much unless I absolutely need to. But when I'm normally painting, I'm moving my pad all around. I'll twist it round so I can get the best angle to paint with. So this line here is actually quite a lot lighter, but I need to start to define it. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of orange first. I'm not actually going to use the yellow. I'm going to use the yellow from the base colour instead. So I'm just going to leave that to shine through. So I've rinsed my brush, I've dabbed it off a little bit. I'm just going to move a wet brush. I don't want it to be soaking wet, I don't want it to spill water in, it's just damp, just so that I get that nice soft edge, and I can take away a little bit of that colour in there so that it's not so prominent. And then I'm going to swap down to a number 6. I've got that base colour on, and now I want to be a little bit more in control. I'm going to pick up a little bit of green. Now this is on to dry, this bit. Got this little bit of a stalk. Just dabbing off a tiny little bit. So what I would like is for this to run a little bit into the orange, so that they're joined together. You can see it blending. That little dab off on the kitchen towel just stops too much coming from the brush well in. I don't want loads, I just wanted enough for that blend. And then here I've squirted out some neat cobalt blue, and I'm just picking up a little bit on the brush. I can just bring that through for shadow on the stalk. Now whilst I'm talking to you and doing this bit, I'm watching this bit all the time. I'm waiting for this to be of a certain, the sheen just going off to come on and do the shadowed bits. If I come on too soon, it will spread out. I'm doing a dab of this. This is the quinachrome magenta. You see where I lifted off there? It's spread out. It's a little bit wet. I can just about get away with it. Start to put some of this shadow in. This is soft shadow, and then on the next layer we will do hard shadow. The more you dab off, the less that will do that. So just spread through. I'm getting that really nice consistency. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that one's nicely dry, so I can now come on to these other two pumpkins. So I'm going to start with this one just so I can rest my hand on the paper if I need to. If you are left-handed, then you do it the other way. So a little bit of water. I'm not too concerned about getting the water absolutely everywhere on the main body of the pumpkin. Then I'm going to bring in the orange. I'm going to leave that little bit of light that's there on the photograph again from the underpainting. The underpainting's been there for a reason and it's working for us. Just choose a line. Often when I do something circular, I end up with several lines and I just choose one as I come to draw it and paint it. Just going to take a very light bit along that edge because it needs an edge there. And the same thing, I'm going to rinse the brush off, dab it off so there's not much water on, and just blend that through because I don't want that edge to be too orange. I want it to stay light. I'm going to pick up my round number 6. So it's of a similar process and come in with the sap green. Just dab a little bit off because I don't want it to run too much, only a little bit into that top of the pumpkin. Just connecting them together. Rinse my brush off, dab into a little bit of cobalt blue, dab a little bit off, and we're going to put some of that soft shadow in. Because this paint is thicker, it's staying put much better. I'm just going to start to wet this side. I'm waiting for the sheen to just go off a little bit on this one at the front. So if I wet the pumpkin this side and start popping this on whilst I'm waiting. You can do one by one, it's absolutely fine. It's really just for the purpose of the video. I'm keeping moving. I do the same in class. Rather than watching paint dry, I watch it carefully, but just keep the painting moving. Again, that fine line. Clean, damp brush rather than wet. Just blend that through. So with my number 6 now, I'm going to pick up some of the quinachrome magenta. Come through. So I'm following those curves on the pumpkin. There's very little on my brush this side. I need that soft shadow there. Now if this happens, where it's dried a little bit too quickly in one place, just take a bit more paint on. So that's just a little bit more of the transparent going on, transparent orange, just to break that line up. It happens to the best of us. Things go wrong in watercolour. You just need to know how to fix them. If you took too much water on there, that would just watermark, but that little bit of paint, it won't watermark. I'm going to come in doing the curves on this side as well. So these are your soft shadows. I'm actually going to take a little bit further down here as well, because it's a bit darker down this bit. And a bit darker this side. It's just all layering this up. So here, that first one I came on with was quite wet, so I'm just going to take a clean, nearly dry brush and just run down each side. That just gets rid of that explosive line that I don't really want there. This is just a little bit of transparent orange going in the bottom here where that bit's dried a bit quicker. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that's nicely dry, and what we're lacking now is some shadow. They're beautiful pumpkins, they're a little bit floaty, so we're going to start to pop some shadow in. So this is where the sepia comes in now. So I've dipped my round number 10 into water, and I'm dipping into the sepia. I'm coming on to dry, and I'm going to get a really nice dark shadow where I can see these dark edges. So right the way under here, a nice dark shadow. And all the way under here. So this will start to really ground the pumpkins, put them onto a surface. You still want the paint to be able to flow. You want it to be nice and dark underneath. Then I'm going to take a tiny bit of the paint and a lot of water. In fact, I'm going to take a bit more water onto that. I want this to be slightly lighter. So I'm just taking a bit more water into that bit. I want it to blend in with these but I want it to feel like I'm creating a bit more of a surface. So this is a bit more like mucky water, just coming through. I'm touching the other shadow that I've done, but not really moving it. I don't mind it blending a little bit. You can see the difference here now. This is mucky water, basically. Start to gel this sharp shadow together. There's a shadow from something else on this side of the picture. And because I've got nothing else in here, I'm not sure whether to put that shadow in there or not. What I think I will do is give a very light indication of something. Because I do quite like the way the shadow curves on the photograph, and it sort of leads your eye into the pumpkins. So we'll take it and work with it. It's always a bit tricky to know whether to put something in when you can't actually see the object. And then I'm going to pop with this watery sepia a few lines. This is all on to dry, and we're going to do a glaze just over the table at the end, just to pull this together. Just a tiny little bit more here. It's just enhancing the reflection, really. Okay, I'm going to swap down to around number 6. Come into a little bit of cobalt blue. You see that on the camera. I'm going to just start to put a bit of sharp shadow into these stalks. So just where it's darkest, I just want that little bit of extra shadow. Don't eliminate all of the soft shadow. If it looks a bit too harsh, then rinse your brush out, dab it on your kitchen towel, and just whilst it's damp, just touch some of those edges so they're not all hard. And it will just help soften it in a little bit. So I'm going to take some of this watery sepia. I'm going to start to run down. So this is still with my number 6. You need to be quite speedy when you're doing this. You vary the pressure that you're applying so you get a different line at each point. And then I've got a clean wet brush here. This is my round number 10. And I'm just going to run down one edge. So one side of that line, I'm running a little bit of water. That just helps soften that in. I'm going to take a little bit more just on this edge here as well. A little bit just coming through here, because that would naturally be more shadowed. I'm going to come down and do the same here now. This is just helping create those nice indents. Got to do that lovely curve. You just don't want them to be too strong. Damp brush again, running down one side. So I'm not really moving the paint, I'm just touching the paint so that it softens in and becomes part of that surface, just on one side. And got a little bit more shadow just within the pumpkin here. I'm just going to paint a little bit more in there and a little bit more on this edge. I can just dab in with the wet brush a little bit as well. Coming down this one. Bigger it is, the trickier it is to get these nice edges in a curve. So this one where I've gone wrong, I'm just going to soften that in and just move that colour there. So you would have seen me just move that paint. There's always the ways and means of fixing it, it's just knowing how. And pop a little bit more shadow down here. There's a little bit more shadow within here. It's given them a really nice three-dimensional feel now. The more of this shadow we get on, the better they'll start to look. With the number 6 now, I'm going to come underneath again with the thicker sepia. To emphasise that sharper shadow again. It's all about the darks when you're doing still life. Rather than the lights, it's definitely the darks that make it. Just those little bits that I'm popping in now, just send those pumpkins shooting forwards. Okay, then I've got this little bit here that I need to have a little look at. I need something that's a bit more yellow. I'm going to take a little bit of the Gambogian. It's classically raw sienna colour, but I wouldn't introduce another colour in. I'd keep the synergy of colours that I've got. So I'm going to use a little bit of Gambogian, a little bit of sepia, just to dot in that little bit there. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is glazing. I need to dry this really well, and I'm going to just show you a glaze just to finish off. Okay, so that's really nicely dry now, and I've got my wash brush. It's a nice soft brush loaded with water, and I've gone into what is left of the orange. I've dabbed a little bit of the quinachrome magenta in there, so I've basically got a watery glaze. And the first thing I'm going to do is come over the pumpkins with this glaze, You've got to be fairly careful and fairly quick. So what I'm trying to do now is create those dashes of light with a watery glaze. Start one side, work the other way. You can use a smaller brush if you want to. You just need to be fairly quick with it. So this is just going to gel and give that sort of bright light on them. So it's gelling everything together and creating the bright light. So I'm just following the shape. When you're glazing, you must always make sure you're totally dry before you do this. But you can see now you've got that beautiful bright light there. And that's the bit that was missing really on the picture. Okay, so I want to glaze this bottom section as well so that I get a table surface. So I'm going to use that well that had the orange in. Classically the table is burnt sienna, but I'm not going to use burnt sienna for that same reason that I've already got about 5 or 6 colours in this picture, and I want a synergy to be there. Once you start adding more colours, it all starts to detach. So I'm going to use a little bit of the quinacridone magenta, a little bit of the sepia, and a little bit of the yellow. And I'm just going to check this colour. So I've got basically a warm brown, which will work for the table. So then I'm going to choose a point. I want that table to start. And just bring this across. Onto the dry, but moving fairly quickly. One side to the other. Try not to go over a section too many times because it will start to lift the paint. And those transparent layers will still come through. So you will still see those other colours coming through after. I'm just going to pick up my round number 10 just so I get a better edge here. It's quite hard to do a straight line with a wash brush. And there we go. Just trying to make sure they're level so the table's level each side. And that's pretty much it. I'll dry it off. And here we go. So it's all finished and I've popped a little mount round so you can see. So it really does show you how something so simple as a couple of pumpkins can make such a beautiful picture. You have learnt a little bit today about wetting wet washes, about mixing colours to consistency, about applying shadow and softening that in, hard shadow, soft shadow and light, a little bit about glazing and layering really. So I hope you've really enjoyed it. I shall pop another link for a still life for you if you've got a taster and you want to carry on, another still life one from me. Please do like, subscribe and comment. Let me know what you think, and I shall see you next time.